Hey friends, it's Holly from Chic Antique and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're going to be refinishing this pine armoire. It has a dark yellowy honey stain on it, which is pretty outdated, and this is actually a commission for one of my clients, and they wanted to brighten up the wood, make the grain show a little bit more, so I'm going to show you exactly how we updated this armoire. We're going to start this makeover like we always do by first removing the knobs, and then we're going to disassemble everything. I'm first going to take off the panels, and then I'm going to take off the doors. And just to make sure I don't lose anything, I have a Ziploc with each hinge and their corresponding screws. Now that everything is disassembled, I'm going to go ahead and start cleaning. I'm going to wear gloves to protect my skin because I'll be using a TSP cleaner. Not only am I cleaning the outside, I'm also cleaning the inside, the drawers, the cabinet, everything inside, just to make sure we have a fresh start. Now after that's dry, I do need to rinse off any residue, so I'll be doing that with some clean clear water. Now we are going to be stripping this piece down to bare wood, so I'm going to be using my random orbital sander, starting with 80 grit sandpaper. And I apologize for the lighting here. My camera was having a really hard time figuring out what to focus on, so the lighting was changing a lot. But I'm using this sandpaper to remove the top coat that's on this piece, as well as the stain. I am going very, very slowly. These clips are sped up about 2000%, so that kind of gives you an idea about how slow I'm going. The reason being, I do not want swirl marks, and I want the finish to be removed as evenly and smooth as possible. And this 80 grit took a lot longer to remove the finish, so moving forward after this section, I'm actually going to use 60 grit to start out. Here's how it's looking so far. The before is on the right side and the after is on the left. I just love how the wood grain looks. You can see more of a variation with the natural wood tone, and I think the grain just is a lot prettier this way. And with the 60 grit, I'm not worried about removing the entirety of the finish with this because the 80 grit and the following grits I'm going to use are going to do that. So I'm moving a little bit quicker now that I'm starting with 60 grit. I'm also making sure not to put too much pressure on my sander. I'm just using my left hand to hold it in place, and then I'm using my right hand just to guide it side to side. I'm not putting much pressure at all. Now moving on to that 80 grit just to remove the remaining finish. And my camera did die in a couple seconds, so I apologize for that, but we did remove the rest of the finish with that 80 grit. Now we're just going to be repeating the same process on the rest of the piece. So now we're going to continue onto the drawer. I'm first starting with 60 grit, and then I'll come back with 80 grit and remove the entirety of the finish. And then we'll be doing that same thing on the drawer panels. You can see the 60 grit worked really well to get the finish off. I will tell you, this is one of the most time-consuming projects I've ever worked on. It wasn't necessarily hard because I knew exactly what I was doing and why I was doing it. It took way longer than I thought it would because before I saw the piece, I didn't know how thick the finish was, how thick the top coat was. You don't know until you see it. So sanding took a lot longer than I thought it would to remove that finish. So if you work on a yellowy pine piece like this in the future, or you're thinking about doing it, make sure to consider how much time you want to put in the project because it will take a really long time because these yellow finishes are really thick. Now we are going to go up in grit to start smoothing everything out and removing any scratches or anything in the surface. So we'll be using 120 grit sandpaper over everything. Not only is this higher grit sandpaper going to smooth everything out and make it very soft to the touch, it's also going to remove any of those scratches like I said, or any of the swirl marks that occurred using the lower grit sandpaper. If you ever see swirls in a finish, it was because they did not use a higher grit sandpaper to smooth it out as they went. You always need to graduate to higher grits to smooth out the wood after you have stripped down the finish. You can see all the dust on my legs. That's so funny. I did get very dusty doing this piece. If you stay to the end, I have a blooper with all of the dust that was on my clothes. It's really funny. For these curved details, I can't use my electric sander. I need to do them by hand. So I'm using a 120 grit sandpaper. The sandpaper is actually for my sander, but these ones are actually a lot more durable than the sheets you can get. And I really need to do my best to remove this finish and save time if I can. So I am using these ones because they're more durable and long lasting. It was actually kind of convenient that it was cold outside when I was doing this because not only did my gloves keep my hands warm, but it also protected them from getting super dry and cut up from the sandpaper. Because this will literally tear your skin to shreds. I'm not kidding. To get this edge here, I'm going to be using my orbital sander, but I'm actually going to be turning down the speed by a lot. I'm going to be turning it down to speed 2, and I'm going to keep the sander moving because if you go too slow, it's going to dig into the wood. So you can see I'm moving quicker, making sure to keep it moving so that it only removes the finish and doesn't make any dents or damage into the shape of the wood. Now moving on to some more of these detailed areas. I apologize, I was using a lot of elbow grease, so it was making my tripod shake a little bit, but I'm using 120 grit sandpaper here to remove the finish off these little curved edges. And then moving on to the bottom skirting, again, I'm using 120 grit sandpaper. This is sped up by a lot. I believe it took me, it was definitely more than an hour. I don't know if it was 2 hours, but just to remove all of this finish off the skirt took way longer than I thought it would because of all these details. And again, because of the stain and top coat were really thick on this piece, so it took longer to sand it off. But you can see how pretty that wood grain is. It is 100% worth it. I could have used a lower grit sandpaper and that would have made it go a lot faster, but because these edges are so curved, it would have really dug into the wood and made a lot more scratches than 120 grit would. So I chose to use 120 because I didn't want to interfere with the shape of these curves and I didn't want to have to sand out a ton of scratches. And look how pretty that is. Now for our final sand, we're going to be using 220 grit sandpaper, and I'm going to be doing this by hand so I can feel along the way how much more I need to sand. If there are any scratches or if it's not feeling smooth, I'm going to feel with my right hand as I go along and see how much more I need to sand. This 220 grit sandpaper is going to make the wood super soft, super smooth, no scratches. And that's exactly what I want. I mean, come on, how pretty is that raw wood? I can't get over it, it's so pretty. Again, more dust on my clothes. It's hilarious. Again, getting in all those details that I hand sanded with this 220 grit sandpaper as well. If you don't use a high grit sandpaper after sanding to raw wood, your finish is not only going to have scratches in it, but it's going to be super gritty. I don't know if you've felt that grittiness before, but it's really not pleasant. It's just so satisfying and beautiful to have a very soft wood finish. I wish you could feel how soft it was. It was amazing. I can't even describe it. After sanding everything, I do need to remove the dust, so I'm going to be using a rag and then a tack cloth to remove any remaining dust. My client wanted to see what a whitewash might look like, so I am doing a small section here just to show them what that might look like before they decide what they would like me to do next. So I'm going to be using a water-based paint to do this whitewash. Similar to the way that you would use a pre-stain for an oil stain, I'm using water here to make sure that the paint absorbs evenly, and that also keeps the paint from going on full strength because I have that water barrier. I'm using the color drop cloth. It is a white with a beigey undertone, so it's not too bright. And I'm using a synthetic brush and just applying this right on the same areas that I applied the water. Then I'm going to use a shop towel and remove the excess right away. And then I'm going to keep applying it and removing the excess with the shop towel. It looks pretty subtle here, but once it's dry, I'll show you what it looks like. And here's how it looked when it was dry. Definitely more white, more stark than the raw wood. And my client decided that they liked the plain raw wood, and that was absolutely no problem, so I just went ahead and sanded it off. And after 10 billion years of sanding, we're finally going to finish up this piece by sealing it. I'll be using a flat clear coat. This one is by Dixie Belle. And before I apply it, I'm going to make sure to stir it up really well. I'm going to be using my zebra chiseled wedge brush to apply this. This is a synthetic brush, so it helps with brush strokes. Although this clear coat is the most invisible one I've used, it doesn't show brush strokes, and really it is invisible. You can't even see it on the surface. It just absorbs right in. It doesn't even darken the wood. That's why I'm using this one, because it dries completely crystal clear. You can see it does look a little bit darker in those areas that I have applied it already, but that is only because this is a wet product sitting on dry wood. Once it is dried, it completely goes away and it goes back to that light wood finish. I want this clear coat to really absorb into the wood and create a nice protective barrier. So I am working this clear coat into the wood more than I normally would, because I really want it to absorb evenly and thoroughly. And like I said, this is invisible. It doesn't show brush strokes, so essentially overworking it is not going to be a problem. And I did do 2 coats of this for added protection. Again, you can see here when I apply it, it does look a little bit darker in those areas, but that's only because I'm putting a wet product on there. It's going to darken the wood, but when it dries, that completely goes away. After letting the clear coat dry really well, I'm going to come back and reassemble everything and put it back together. And now that all the work is complete, I just want to remind you what we started with. And here's how it looks now. Thank you guys so much for joining me on this makeover today. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to leave me a comment letting me know what you think of the end result. Like I said, this was a lot more work than I thought it was going to be, but I couldn't be happier with the final result. I think it's really fresh and really beautiful. It almost reminds me of the beach, kind of like a driftwood beachy look. I'm obsessed with it. If you like this style of content, make sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell. That way you're notified every time I upload. And make sure to check out some of my other videos before you leave as well. I'll have my most recent upload in the eye above, as well as down below in the description, as well as some other videos that I think you might like. So I thank you guys again so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye. Can these birds shut up? It's so close up you can't even see. Wow, you just destroyed it. The entire thing is broken. It's literally a square here. You can't see it.
Oh, you're a YouTuber? Name every YouTube.
Okay, get out of my shot.
No.
Okay, bye. Leave! Oops. I came in here like a few minutes ago and the light was on, so cursed?
There's ghosts, let's just make friends.
I don't think those are the type of friends that I want.
I don't think you have any other options.
Okay.
Got that on video. Get exposed. That's going in the blooper reel.
Woo!